How do you prevent a crisis like, say, a global zombie apocalypse from ever happening again? You collect data, you study, you understand, and you remember. In Max Brooks' seminal zombie apocalypse thriller, today's Velshi Van Book Club feature, World War Z, documenting humanity is central. It's set in an alternative 21st century world after a zombie apocalypse, a pandemic that began in a small Chinese village, infected and subsequently killed millions of people. Quote, the official report was a collection of cold, hard data, an objective after-action report that would allow future generations to study the events of that apocalyptic decade without being influenced by the human factor. In the end, isn't the human factor the only true difference between us and the enemy we now referred to as the living dead? I presented this argument, perhaps less professionally than was appropriate, to my boss, who, after my final exclamation of, "We can't let these stories die," responded immediately with, "Then don't. Write a book." Okay, told to us through a series of interviews, all conducted by a fictional version of the author, Max Brooks, there's very intentionally no hero in this story. Each interview subject is a survivor of the apocalypse, each with a different role to play. In the first chapter, for example, we meet a doctor. Quote, they warned me not to touch him, that he was cursed. I shrugged them off and reached for my mask and gloves. The boy's skin was as cold and gray as the cement on which he lay. I could find neither his heartbeat nor his pulse. His eyes were wild, wide, and sunken back in their sockets. They remained locked on me like a predatory beast. Throughout the examination, he was inexplicably hostile, reaching for me with his bound hands and snapping at me through his gag. I instinctively retreated several paces. I'm embarrassed to admit this. I've been a doctor for most of my adult life. I've treated more than my share of combat injuries, faced my own death on more than one occasion, and now I was scared, truly scared, of this frail child, end quote. Then we meet a CIA director, a pilot, an artist. World War Z is a masterclass in world building. Each chapter, each anecdote, and each survivor illuminates more of the world in which World War Z exists. There are moments that feel uncanny, eerily reminiscent of our world in the wake of COVID-19, or a world that could easily come to be. While World War Z grapples with human short-sightedness, the power of fear, the fragility of modern life, the necessity of humanity in the face of chaos, at its core, World War Z is a book about survival. In fact, just under the surface of Brooks' masterfully created fictional world and fictional catastrophe is an examination of adaptability and what it takes to survive. Zombies and zombie apocalypse stories, from novels like World War Z to movie shows and video games, have mushroomed into an immensely popular genre. Right now, for example, there's a zombie movie in theaters, and a hit HBO zombie series just wrapped up about a month ago. Even World War Z was adapted into a major motion picture featuring Brad Pitt. Counterintuitive, maybe, but stories that reveal the cracks in our society, our government, and our ability to survive, even in the wake of a pandemic of our own making, remain more relevant than ever. Akin to the dystopian novels we've covered so extensively on the Velshi Band Book Club, there's an appeal to facing the worst-case scenario through the pages of a book. World War Z has notoriously been banned and censored in China because of detailed scenes that are critical of the real Chinese government off the page. But it isn't just in China. World War Z has faced bans and challenges here in the United States, chiefly in 2 different school districts in Florida and 1 in Wisconsin. Right after the break, I'm joined by Max Brooks, the best-selling author of several books, including today's Velshi Band Book Club feature, World War Z, an oral history of the zombie war. All right, today's session of the Velshi Band Book Club is now officially underway. I'm joined now by Max Brooks, the best-selling author of several books, including the contemporary classic World War Z, which is a cornerstone of the modern zombie literary canon. And I think maybe this is the first time we've done something from that canon on this show. Thank you to the newest member of the Velshi Band Book Club, Max Brooks, author of numerous books. Max, good to see you. Welcome.
Good to see you, too. Thanks for having me.
This is not an area of our expertise on the Velshi Band Book Club, and my first instinct was, why did anybody even ban this book? You were really responsible, certainly part of the group responsible for the launching of this popularity in zombie stuff, which is now all around us.
Well, I was part of the second launch. The first launch was George Romero in the 1970s, which made zombies popular for the same reason it's popular now, because there is a subconscious feeling that the system is breaking down.
Right.
And there was that same feeling in the 1970s that the old institutions were cracking at the seams, and we needed sort of a psychological condom, if you will, to explore it. So you do that with something like zombies.
And tell me why that works. Why do people see this as something they can retreat into?
Well, because we all have the ego defense mechanism, right? There's that little guard in our brain that prevents us from going crazy. And if you talk about crises that are too real,
right,
like a real pandemic, it is human nature for us to tune out to save our psyche. But if you give it a veneer of something fictional, like zombies, you can explore all the real factors. Yet your brain can still tell you, well,
it's a fantasy.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Right. All right. I want to read a little bit from the book about misinformation. I want to remind people this book was written in 2006. Quote, ignorance was the enemy. Lies and superstition, misinformation, disinformation, sometimes no information at all. Ignorance killed billions of people. Ignorance caused the zombie war. Imagine if we had known then what we know now. Imagine if the undead virus had been as understood as, say, tuberculosis was. Imagine if the world's citizens, or at least those charged with protecting those citizens, had known exactly what they were facing. Ignorance was the real enemy, and cold, hard facts were the weapons, end quote. I mean, Max, you wrote that in 2006. Maybe you wrote it before that. It was published in 2006. It's more relevant today than it was then.
Yeah. Well, if I wrote this today, this would be the central theme of the book. Because when I wrote it, we were just starting to pick away at sort of shared narratives, objective facts. We were eating away at the edges. It was before we had the iPhone. It was before you could carry around disinformation in your pocket.
You could get it on the internet, but it was one step removed.
You had to go home. You had to log on. Sometimes you had to hear the squeal of dial-up to be lied to. Now you can be lied to 24/7.
Talk about the short-sightedness that you embrace in that, but in the book in general. You've explored this theme of short-sightedness through the apocalypse.
Well, unfortunately, this is not the first time in my lifetime that misinformation has gotten ahead of crises and killed people. I'm Gen X. I grew up during the AIDS epidemic.
Right.
And we went from the great denial, you know, that's a them disease. It can't hurt me. And
this is going to be the end of the world.
Right. It's on toilet seats. It's on your McDonald's Happy Meal. It's everywhere. So for me, this is part of my childhood. I just took it to another level.
Let's talk about, I want to read another passage from the book. The only rule that ever made sense to me, I learned from history, not economics, from a history, not an economics professor at Wharton. Fear, he used to say. Fear is the most valuable commodity in the universe. That blew me away. Turn on the TV, he'd say. What are you seeing? People selling their products. No? People selling the fear of you having to live without their products. Fear is the most basic emotion we have. Fear is primal. Fear sells.
Yeah.
Once again, you wrote this 20 years ago.
Right. And
it sold then.
And I wrote that in the wake of 9/11, where everything was fear. I was in New York when that happened, and it was fear, fear, fear all the time. And the Bush administration really did base its entire power on the fact that I know you're all scared. I'm going to keep you safe. And that's how power works a lot of times. That's how advertisement works. You don't want to be that person not sharing with the group. So buy our product and you'll be cool.
Kind of amazing to me that it works as well now as it did not only in 2006, but as it did during World War II. And I wonder how much we're learning, but I'm glad to share this with you. And thank you for being the newest member of the Velshi Band Book Club, and great to meet you in person.
Good to meet you.
Max Brooks is the author of World War Z and numerous other books. World War Z, by the way, the full title is An Oral History of the Zombie War.